Hi, welcome back. This is Melissa Muir, and we're here for another Tool Time Tuesday. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about tube setting stones. In this piece, the stone is a 6mm CZ. It's a faceted stone, and a popular way to set some of these is through a tube setting. Tube setting is basically a bezel setting, except that you're not making the bezel with a strip of wire, you are actually using thick-walled tubing. So let's look at some of the tools that we need for tube setting. Now in this case, obviously, we need to have our faceted stones. Tube setting is done with round stones only, and it also helps if they're calibrated. That just means that they're going to be precisely cut, not have funky little angles on the bottom or anything like that. It just makes it easier to set pieces like that. At least that's how we're going to be doing it for today. In this case, I have a couple of different burrs that I'm going to use. I have a ball burr, okay, and it just is, let's see if we can get it to focus in on the ball burr here. Okay, so there's our ball burr, and again, it's a ball, and it has like the different cuts on here, similar to what you would have in a file, and this is to remove some of our material quite quickly. Then to finish up our seat for our stone, we switch over to a setting burr, and this is going to be used to create, like I said, that flat seat so that our stone can just sit nicely inside of that. I also use my digital calipers. I've got my tube cutting jig, my saw, and most importantly, we have our tubing. Now in this case, the tubing that I use is sterling silver. You can also get fine silver, and I do buy this in thick-walled tubing. You need to have it thick-walled so that you can cut your seat into the tube. Typically what I do is I buy my tubing so it is about a 1/2 millimeter wider than my stone. So if I have a 6mm stone, then my tubing is going to be 6.5 millimeters with approximately a 1mm wide or thick wall on the inside there. Alright, first thing is first, we need to measure our stone. Now I happen to know that my stones are 6mm, but if I didn't, I could go ahead and use my digital calipers here. It's set to millimeters, and what I do is I just come in and I like to set my stone probably just face down on my finger, if I can get it to do it here now. So I just set it down face down on my finger, bring my caliper in, and measure right there at the girdle. Okay, so in this case, our stone is 6.05 millimeters, so pretty close to 6 millimeters. The next measurement that I need is from the cullet, which is our point, to the top of the stone, which is our table. So I hold the stone by its girdle. Again, I'm going to bring my calipers in, come in, close it so that I can hold my stone in there. Easier said than done sometimes. So let's try that one more time. Come in, hold the stone, again, by the table and the cullet. Now I like to find that measurement of my stone. Okay, again, we've got 3.60 here for the stone for the height on this. And what I like to do is I like to make my measurement 1 millimeter at least larger than my stone. So I'm going to bring this out to 4.60, tie that off right there. Now the reason for making this a little bit larger is so that I can make sure that as I cut the depth of my seat that I don't poke out the bottom of my setting. The next step is to mark my tubing so I know where to cut it. Here's a little trick I learned a little while back. I take a Sharpie and I just kind of darken here around the edges. Looks like my Sharpie's dying here, but that's alright. So I just darken an area around my Sharpie. And the reason for this is that as I go through and I score this, I will easily be able to see the score marks on my tubing, and then I can easily line that up to cut my tubing length as needed. Okay, once I have my Sharpie marked on here, I'll just take my calipers, set them along the top edge, and then I take and I just spin my tubing carefully. And as I do this, I'm not sure if you can see this in the video or not, but it creates a very, very thin score line, and because I've got that Sharpie on there, it shows up as a nice bright flashing line for me, and then I can easily see where this needs to be cut. Okay, I have this great tool called a tube cutting jig. It just looks a little like this. There's a groove here at the top. I also have a little lever here. that goes ahead and holds my tubing down when I need to finally get this in place and cut. We have a groove right here. This is where my saw blade goes through so that I can line everything up, and then I can use that as a guide to cut my tubing. So what I'm going to do is line up that line that I just scored. I hold this down with my thumb. In this case, I use my jeweler's saw. I like to support my tube cutting jig on a bench or something. I'm holding it over my catch tray. Insert my saw blade, and then I'm just going to cut through this tubing. Alright, so we're going to use the power and magic of television, and I'll be right back with a finished piece. Alright, I now have my tubing cut, and another thing that I've already also done is cleaned it up and made sure that it was completely flush and even using a miter cutting vise. For more information on this, visit my blog, search under Tool Time Tuesdays, and for miter cutting vise, and there's a tutorial there how to use that tool. Okay, at this point I have my tube soldered onto my piece. I've gotten it to the pre-polishing stage, and what we need to do now is drill the seat down into our tubing to hold our stone. Alright, here I'm at my drill press and I have everything ready to go. I have the ball burr installed. I've positioned my piece so that when I come down, and it's very important that you come and drill straight down, otherwise you're going to make your side walls a little uneven on one side. So take the time, make sure that everything is really truly even. Okay, now I've precariously perched my piece onto this little piece of wood here, and that's because I've already soldered on a bail and it's just kind of in the way a little bit. So again, like I said, make sure that you get everything nice and even. Make sure that when you come down, you're going to come straight into this. It's very important that you use a lot of lubrication. So things that you can use, this is a liquid burr life from Rio Grande, but there's also Tap Magic sewing machine oil that you can also use as a lubricant. You just want to keep your burrs cool and running. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn on my drill press, and we're going to just come down and begin to drill. Okay, so at this point we kind of have a little bit of a seat cut into this. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. This is a great way to at least start your seat. Okay, at this point you want to take some time and look at the rim of your setting here and just make certain that it's actually even. If not, then you need to make some adjustments, and then you can start to go back in and cut some more. Okay, once you've got your depth deep enough, well, at least you want to try to sit your stone in there. You don't want your stone to go completely in all the way at that point, but just make sure that your stone is fitting into the width at the top of the setting. Now I've switched out to my setting burr, and I'm going to go ahead and drill in the flat seat for my stone. I don't know that you'll be able to really see it here in the video, but I actually have kind of a flat sidewall in my piece, and then the rest of the seat kind of curves in a little bit so that it will match the points on my stone. Okay, so here I've taken the stone. Let's see if we can get this here in focus. I've gone ahead and placed the stone into the setting. Now, I'm not sure how everybody else does it, but I like it when my stone sits completely flush, at least the table sits flush with that top edge of my new bezel that I've just created. Okay, and that allows me to not have too much material, but just enough that I can fold over the edges over that girdle, and then everything should hold into place. So at this point, everything is perfect just the way I want it. And now it's time to set the stone. For my final step, I'm going to use some bezel setting punches. They are just little concave punches here and really slick to use. You just take your bezel, setting punch, you put it on top of your tube setting. Give a couple of taps with the rawhide mallet. I like to kind of spin the piece just in case there is a spot in my punch that might not be quite even. Okay, it's not completely set at this point, and I just need to double check my stone, make sure everything is set okay as far as the seat goes. Okay, so at this point I'm still able to move my stone, but my edges are starting to come over. So again, I'm just going to come back in here. And you don't want to tap too hard with your hammer. If you hit too hard, you run the risk of actually breaking your stone. I've had a lot of my students that have tried this method and they have ended up cracking their stones. So you do want to use a little bit of caution as you're doing this. Okay, and this one still has a little bit more that I can go with it. Okay, now at this point it looks pretty even. My stone is actually set. Let's see if I can get this in here for you. Everything is laying down nicely, and from here I will just take a burnisher and run around the edges just like I would with a bezel setting, and then I'm done. Do my final polishing and call it good. And that's how you do a bezel set, or rather a tube set.